This video is brought to you by Brilliant. When far-left German politician Sahra Wagenknecht launched her new party back in January, she claimed she wanted to overcome the, quote, incompetence and arrogance of Germany's centre-left coalition government, and also, somewhat more ambitiously, to change the German party system. 6 months later, she seems to be doing just that. The latest polling data, recorded last week by INSA, the Institute for New Social Answers, now shows Wagenknecht's far-left party, humbly named the Sahra Wagenknecht Alliance, or BSW, hitting 9.5% nationally. For comparison, this is almost twice the current polling numbers of the governing coalition's centrist Free Democratic Party, 1 percentage point behind the coalition Greens, and about 5 percentage points behind the centre-left Social Democratic Party, SPD, of German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. So in this video, we'll take a look at the BSW, the latest polling data, and why the far left is surging in Germany. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop when we release new videos. But first, let's start by explaining what the BSW actually want. Its founder, Sahra Wagenknecht, is actually a former member of Germany's The Left Party, who was elected its vice president in 2010 and became a prominent opposition figure as co-leader of the party's parliamentary group from 2015 to 2019, before resigning, citing burnout. But even while she was part of the left, Wagenknecht had ambitions to lead her own more radical movement. She was instrumental in the foundation of the now dormant Aufstehen, or Stand Up movement, in 2018, which was a far-left pressure group that aimed to push German politics to the left, in a similar way to Jean-Luc Mélenchon's La France Insoumise in France. However, Aufstehen was criticised by liberal left-wingers for its populist policies and hostile stance on immigration, and Wagenknecht herself was also criticised for having been a member of the Communist Platform, a Marxist faction within the left. For context, Wagenknecht grew up in the former GDR, East Germany, which she once described as the most peaceful and most philanthropic polity that the Germans created in all of their history. Over time, though, Wagenknecht's ideological feud with the left only became more intense. While they were generally pretty aligned on economic policy, she split with other leftists over questions of identity politics, immigration, net zero, and foreign policy. In 2021, Wagenknecht even wrote a book called Die Selbstgerechten, or The Self-Righteous, in which she attacked what she calls left liberalism and the seemingly growing focus on, quote, ever smaller and ever more bizarre minorities. She also argued that the left's electoral failures and poor polling were down to the party's overemphasis on issues like gender, race, and sexuality, instead of the economy. Now, Wagenknecht also opposes more immigration, arguing that migrants are bad for the German working class. They put at least a temporary strain on the German welfare state and push down wages for low-paid workers. So instead, Wagenknecht wants to emulate the Social Democrats of Denmark, a centre-left party who swung drastically to the right on immigration under their current leader, successfully stemming migration flows and helping the Social Democrats to win consecutive elections while other centre-left parties were struggling across Europe. Wagenknecht is also skeptical of the energy transition, both because she thinks that heavy industry is key to economic prosperity in Germany's poorer regions, especially in the east, and because she believes that renewables alone cannot guarantee Germany's energy security. And when it comes to foreign policy, Wagenknecht is an old-school left-wing pacifist. She doesn't like NATO, which she sees as a vehicle for American imperialism, and she refused to support sanctions against Russia, accusing the German government of launching a, quote, unprecedented economic war against Germany's most important energy supplier. Anyway, by January 2024, it was crunch time, and Wagenknecht officially launched the BSW with the support of some 40 other former members of the left. Now, for the first few months of its existence, the BSW was polling consistently low at around 6% and registered a mediocre vote share of 6.2% at the European elections in June. But now, with the September state elections in Thuringia, Brandenburg, and Saxony fast approaching, the BSW appears to be experiencing an electoral surge. The latest polling data from INSA shows that nationally, the BSW has hit 9.5%. But what's particularly interesting are the numbers from the 5 former East German federal states. The BSW is polling as high as 19% in Thuringia, close behind the centre-right Christian Democratic Union on 21%, with the far-right AfD in front on 30%. It's also polling at 17% in Brandenburg, pretty close to both the CDU and the SPD, and at 16% in Saxony-Anhalt and 14% in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. But whilst the BSW is still behind both the CDU and AFD, their numbers have surged rapidly and could still tick up if they can siphon off votes from the AFD. Now, it looks like this strategy could work for the BSW too, as a survey by the German broadcaster ZDF in March showed that a large proportion, 43%, of current AFD supporters said they would consider voting for the BSW in the next national election, compared to 17% overall. This is largely because of the BSW and AFD's restrictive immigration policies, but also because of both parties' soft stance on Russia, which is generally viewed less harshly in the East. So, what explains the BSW's apparent popularity? Well, we've got three main suggestions. 1, the perceived failures of Germany's current left-wing parties. 2, the BSW's ideological overlap with the AFD. And 3, Wagenknecht's own popularity. First up, Germany's struggling left-wing. Germany's current centre-left coalition has had a pretty terrible run in government, largely due to recurring disagreements over the budget and environmental policy, with Chancellor Scholz's SPD registering its worst ever results at the European elections in June, and the Greens also suffering an 8.6 percentage point drop in vote share compared to 2019. Wagenknecht's former party, the Left, has also been trailing in the polls for years now, beset by factionalism and ideologically squeezed by the more popular Greens. Second, the BSW's ideological overlap with the AFD. When Wagenknecht formed her party, analysts were quick to point out that it would be the AFD who'd have the most cause for concern. This is because the BSW and AFD are both in favour of a hardline immigration system. They're sceptical about green policies and relatively anti-Ukraine. They're also both competing mostly for socially conservative voters in Eastern Germany. Finally, Wagenknecht herself is pretty popular. Wagenknecht has always had an outsized public profile in Germany that transcended her party, and a survey from February showed that a majority of Germans thinks she speaks clearly, 60%, and is a strong leader, 53%. Moreover, 49% thinks she knows what moves people, while 43% think she's competent. Once again, if we look at the results from Eastern Germany, Wagenknecht's ratings are at least 10 percentage points higher on every metric, and they're even higher among AFD voters specifically. So, all in all, it looks like the BSW is on its way to achieving what it set out to do. But we'll have a much clearer picture of whether Germany really is experiencing a far-left surge after the upcoming state elections in just a few weeks' time.
There's a lot of difficult decisions to make here, and making huge decisions is difficult, even for world leaders. The good thing is that Brilliant is where you learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in maths, data, programming, and AI. Their interactive classes help build your critical thinking skills through problem solving, not memorizing. So while you're building real knowledge on specific topics, you'll also be becoming a better thinker. For instance, their Predicting with Probability course can help you better understand and assess the world around you. You can learn to wrangle massive datasets, compare distributions, and master fundamental concepts like Bayes' theorem. That might sound a little technical, but with their active learning, you learn this by answering questions like which airline is least likely to have a delay due to weather, and how much more unruly airline passengers have gotten since the pandemic. Data skills are absolutely necessary for navigating the modern world, and Brilliant is the best way to get them. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/TLDR, or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription.